speaker, Alexa Alimanie. She is assistant professor of screenwriting at USC and New York Film Academy. She started her career as an actor and is most well known for playing Allison on the Emmy-winning AMC drama Mad Men for 4 seasons, for which she won a SAG Award. As a writer in television, she staffed on TNT's hit show The Librarians. On the feature side, she wrote Something Blue, the sequel to Something Borrowed for Black Label Media, as well as the book adaptation of Serpent's Bite with Grey Eagle Films. She sold original features to UCP for USA Networks, among others, and most recently to Level Forward and Potable Entertainment. She also runs her own writing studio, Bad Pitch Writers Lab. She is a graduate of Vassar College with a degree in theater and history. Please welcome Alexa Alimanie. Alexa Alimanie, please take it away.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. So we are here today to talk about story adaptation for film and television. Thank you, April, for the introduction. Primarily what we're going to be talking about is 3 things. First, what makes a great adaptation. Second, we're going to go a little deeper into that in terms of what the various categories are of what can be adapted. And third, we're going to look a little bit at the business side of things and how to go about actually getting the rights and getting access to material or using your own material to adapt for film and television. So let's get started. So the first thing that I want to talk about is what is really the most central element to any kind of adaptation for film or for television. And that is this very simple idea of what is a point of view. So when we talk about point of view, we talk about this for any work for film or television, but particularly for adaptation. Adaptation doesn't work without a strong point of view. So let's talk about what that means, how you can find one, and what exactly is required to have a successful point of view for an adaptation. So when we talk about point of view, what we mean by that is this idea that, look, we all tell stories. Children know how to tell stories. The purpose of telling a story is to make somebody feel something. That's it. That's what we're doing. I tell a story to my mom for a purpose, to get her to lend me money. I tell a story to my best friend to make her feel better. I tell a story to my boss because I didn't finish the job on time. We tell stories for a purpose in life. But when it comes to our writing, oftentimes we lose sight of how important it is to have a purpose. So when we sit down to write, whether it's an original piece or an adaptation, but especially when it's an adaptation, it is absolutely vital that we start with the question of saying, what is my point? What am I trying to say? What do I want to make my audience feel? Every screenwriter, every storyteller has a purpose. They have something that they are exploring, something that they want you, the audience, to see or understand. But somehow when we first start in on this stuff, we get lost in character and devices and structure and coming up with something cool or a clever plot device, save the cat stuff, and we forget the very basic rule of storytelling. Why are you telling it to me? And what is your point? Now, there's a way to think about point of view as something having to do with theme. Now, I hate theme. I think it's a really ugly word. And one of the reasons behind that is I think it goes back to 2nd and 3rd grade when you had to write a book report on Peter Rabbit, and you would list the themes in the book. And you would say, you know, the themes of Peter Rabbit are family and friendship. And they're just words. They're words that have no meaning or purpose behind it, right? What really matters is what is your point of view on the theme? What is your point of view on the story? Every screenwriter has a different way of talking about this. John August, he says it is the spine of the story. Zettelin says it's the questions he can't answer, but really wants to explore. Susanna Grant talks about it as the problems she wishes she could solve. Lena Waithe says it's the stuff that matters. Danny Strong said once, it's the things you say when you are drinking and stupid, but really passionate about it. That's point of view. We have such a fear of opinions and expressing our opinions, but screenwriting is subjective. And ultimately, an adaptation is subjective. It is telling a story for a purpose that is your own. It's not a craft of being politically correct and careful in your stories. It's about saying, I have a voice, and this voice has an opinion, and this story is the vehicle through which I'm going to talk about the thing that I care about. And that is so much more than theme. That's point of view. And what you'll find is that screenwriters over and over and over again explore the same questions for themselves. If you look at Aaron Sorkin, whether he's working on an adaptation or whether he's working on an original piece, consistently, he's always asking the question, does being good lead to being right? Greta Gerwig, whether she's writing an original piece or whether she's adapting Little Women, is always exploring the same question, why can't a woman be more than one thing? For me, personally, when I pick up a book that I'm looking to adapt or when I'm writing something original, I always circle back to a lot of the same questions that I want to explore. For me, it's about controlling my own destiny. Understanding this idea of point of view is the most important element for understanding how to have a successful adaptation. On the business side, as a professional screenwriter, when you get hired on a job, you're getting hired on an adaptation job because of your take. And when development executives ask, they say, what's your take? What they mean is, what's your point of view? What are you bringing to this, right? They're not interested in the characters of the story that already exists. That's the thing you're adapting. What they're interested in is, what are you bringing to it? What's your take? What are you trying to say? So let's look at how you go about actually building a point of view. So you have this product, this thing that you want to adapt, and you're trying to figure out, how do I find my take on this, right? So we look at sort of what are these central words, these theme words that run through whatever material we're adapting, right? Wealth, joy, friendship, class. And then we ask ourselves, what do I think about that? What do I think about that? Not what did the writer of the original work think about it, but what do I think about it? So if we were going to talk about friendship, I might say, I fundamentally believe that friendship is all you need to be happy. Now, there's something really interesting about that sentence, because I want you to notice how it has a strong opinion. Again, let's come back to this idea that adaptation and point of view requires that you have an opinion. Right? This isn't you being polite and saying like, well, I think friendship can make you happy. I think family can make you happy. No, this is my opinion. I fundamentally believe that friendship is all that you need to be happy. Well, now I have an opinion. I fundamentally believe success does not have to mean sacrifice. I fundamentally believe that the only way to move forward has to include moving backwards. So just to show you what I mean by that, those three sentences that I just gave you, those are all the point of view sentences for movies that are adaptations. When we talk about this idea of success doesn't have to be everything and requires sacrifice, that's the thematic point of view of Little Women. Now, there have been 4 film adaptations of Little Women over the past 100 years. Of those 4 adaptations, every single one of them has a different point of view. What Greta Gerwig wanted to explore was, is it possible to be successful without sacrifice? And the answer was, well, I don't want to ruin the movie for you, but that's the angle that she wanted to explore. And so the opening images, the character arcs, how she chooses to tell Joe's story is all through the lens of, how do I prove my point? If we look at something like The Farewell, right, it is the thematic point of view of saying the only way to move forward is you have to take a step back. right? Now, The Farewell is based on a podcast, on the screenwriter's original podcast that then she adapted into a movie, right? But that question is what she wanted to say. So I'm telling a story about a grandmother who's dying and a girl who goes home to visit her and reconnect with the family. But what I'm really trying to say is this. And somebody else, anybody else in this room, could look at that story of somebody going home with a family member passing and have a different thing that they want to say about it. So imagine, let's use The Social Network here as an example, which is an adaptation based on a real person, on a autobiographical figure, right? If we take something like The Social Network and we say, I want to make a movie about the creation of Facebook. And I bring in 4 writers, and I ask all 4 of those writers, what's your take? How are you going to tell me the story of the creation of Facebook? What are you bringing to it? What do you want to say about it? You might want to talk about how it's the tragedy of what's happening now and how maybe it was all foreseen and you could have seen it coming down the pipeline. That's a take. That's going to give your character, that's going to give you clues for the journey you want your character to go on. What Aaron Sorkin said is, I want to make it about friendship. And I want to make a story about a guy who doesn't believe that friendship is important, and yet, ironically, goes on to create this thing that connects the entire world, right? That's his take on the story. What's your opinion? What is it that you want to say? This is the most important element of any kind of adaptation. And the thing that's really important to understand about this stuff is to say that once you have a point of view, you can use the material to shape a character journey, to go on a journey to understand that point of view, right? So Craig Mazin says, in using theme to give you structure, the purpose of the story is to take your character, to take that protagonist from the place of ignorance, of understanding your point of view, and taking them all the way to where they become the embodiment, the literal embodiment of the argument that you are trying to make. So one of the things that's so great about thinking about adaptation this way is that if you can figure out what it is inherently that you are trying to say and understand what is the point that you are trying to make, then you can look at the material you have and say, I'm going to take a character on a journey where they come to understand that point of view, right? This is the very central idea that can give you structure, it can give you character, it can give you devices that you want to use, it can give you dialogue, it can give you everything that you need, it can give you all the tools that you need to make this work for film and television by simply asking yourself, what am I trying to say? What is my take on this story? Now, one of the things that I find really interesting about this is that when you start looking at material that is out in the world and start thinking about it this way, you start to see how clear and sharp point of view is. Now, I could use, for instance, every single time they redo a Jane Austen movie, right, which they've done thousands of times, or if you've watched Dickinson recently, what we're doing is we're taking historical figures or we're taking literary works and we're saying, how do I interpret it? And what's really important about that is also another fundamental principle of adaptation, which is to say you have to separate yourself from the original art form. It's called an adaptation, which means that you are taking something and you are leaving it behind and creating something new. And the only way to do that is to have your own point of view, to let it become its own new piece of art, separate and inspired by the thing that it came from, but its own unique piece of art with its own point of view. So point of view is this overriding principle